That swing hasn't moved in 3 years, and now my dog won't stop staring at it. I said it out loud, like it might break the spell. But Ruckus didn't even flick an ear. My golden retriever, usually so quick to leap at squirrels or joggers or really anything with a heartbeat, just sat stone still at the edge of the park. His eyes were locked on the old wooden swing that hung from the massive oak tree in the middle of Hollow Creek Park. It was early. Sunlight filtered through the high branches, dappling the grass in soft gold. The park was empty, like always. Parents didn't bring their kids here anymore, not after what happened. And yet here we were, Ruckus and I, breaking a routine we hadn't touched in years. I hadn't even meant to walk this way. Something just tugged me. Ruckus refused to budge. I gave the leash a gentle tug. Nothing. Come on, buddy. Let's finish our loop. His tail gave one slow thump, but his gaze stayed fixed. I followed it. The swing hung perfectly still, not a breath of wind to stir it. But something about it felt wrong, like the air around it was holding its breath. It was just a swing, just a weather-worn plank of wood and 2 faded ropes. But Ruckus had never acted like this. I'd had him since he was a pup, and not once in 8 years had he frozen up like this. That's when I saw the stuffed animal. It was lying right under the swing, a tiny giraffe, sun-bleached and ragged. I blinked. Had that been there before? I stepped closer. Ruckus didn't follow, just let out a quiet whine. I knelt down and picked it up. The fabric was stiff with dirt, but there was something familiar about it. Something in the eyes. A memory hit me like a punch. 3 years ago, a little girl named Lily had disappeared right from this park. She'd been on that swing. Her mom looked away for a moment to answer a call, and when she turned back, Lily was gone. No witnesses, no suspects. Nothing but that silent swing swaying in the breeze. I clutched the giraffe tighter. The police had combed every inch of the area. So had the volunteers. I was one of them. I remembered the long nights, the hushed voices, the candlelight vigils. I remembered Lily's father sitting on that bench over there, his eyes hollow. The search had faded. People moved on. But the park never recovered. Neither did I. Ruckus whined again. "It's okay," I said, though I didn't believe it. I looked around. Still no one. I walked the giraffe to the bench and sat. Ruckus finally joined me, resting his chin on my knee. I stared at the toy. Could someone have planted it here? As a cruel joke? A message? My mind spun him. I pulled out my phone and called the local precinct. Not 911. It didn't feel like an emergency. Yet. I asked to speak to Officer Wilkins, the man who'd led the investigation back then. He picked up after the 3rd ring. "It's Daniel Moore," I said. "I think you need to come to Hollow Creek Park." There was a pause. Why? Because my dog just led me to something I don't think anyone ever found. He showed up 15 minutes later in an unmarked car. His gait was slower than I remembered, hair grayer, but his eyes were still sharp. I handed him the giraffe. He didn't speak at first, just studied it. "We cataloged every item found during the search," he said finally. "This wasn't one of them." My throat felt dry. "Then it's new?" He shook his head slowly. "It's old, been out here a while, just not in plain sight." He crouched beside the swing, scanning the ground. Then he called in for a forensic sweep. Within the hour, 2 more officers arrived with tape and kits. They brushed the dirt, bagged the giraffe, took photos, all while Ruckus stood silent guard. I felt useless. I kept petting Ruckus, whispering thanks. For what? I wasn't sure yet. Wilkins walked back to me. You said the dog wouldn't stop staring at the swing? I nodded. Let's try something, he said. He walked Ruckus back about 20 feet, unhooked his leash, and gave him a simple command. Find. Ruckus paused, sniffed the air, then trotted straight past the swing toward the bushes lining the east side of the park. He stopped at a tree trunk and began pawing at the dirt. The officers followed. One began digging carefully. Then he froze. Sir, you should see this. It was another toy, a small red car, plastic worn but recognizable, and under it, something wrapped in faded pink fabric, a child's hoodie. Ruckus sat beside the find, tail thumping once. Wilkins looked at me, then back at the swing. Looks like your dog might have just reopened a cold case. The news broke the next day. Reporters swarmed the park. Cameras caught me mid-walk, trying to shield Ruckus from the noise, but they still got his picture. Local dog may have found new clues in missing child case. The headline spread like wildfire. Interviews followed. I declined most. I wasn't in it for the spotlight. But Ruckus, he became something of a symbol. Hope, patience, loyalty. I started bringing him back to the park every morning, not to dig or search, just to sit. He still stared at that swing. Not every second, not with the same focus as before, but like he was waiting for something. Or someone. And a part of me started to understand. It wasn't just about the case. It was about the memories. The silence that hung there. The space that needed to be filled. Ruckus was listening for something none of us could hear. Yet. And I had a feeling this was just the beginning. By the following Monday, Hollow Creek Park didn't feel like the same place anymore. There were marked cars at both entrances, a small mobile forensics tent set up near the oak tree, and yellow tape that looped around half the playground. But that didn't stop the curious. People had started gathering at the edge of the walking trail, murmuring in soft tones and pointing at the spot where Ruckus had sat so still just days before. Ruckus didn't care about the attention. He trotted past the crowd like they were squirrels he'd long grown bored of chasing. He stopped in his usual place, 15 feet from the swing, and sat down, his gaze returning to the same spot beneath the oak tree. I brought my thermos of coffee and stood beside him. We hadn't spoken to anyone since Friday, aside from Wilkins, and a younger officer named Brad who had been assigned to liaise with me. Brad had a good heart, a soft tone when speaking to Ruckus, and an admiration in his eyes every time he watched the dog in action. Anything new? I asked when Brad approached that morning. He looked more rested than he had over the weekend. He nodded slowly. The hoodie tested positive for Lily's DNA. The giraffe, too. I swallowed hard. They also found traces of something else on the swing ropes, he added. Synthetic fibers. Blue. Like something was tied there at some point. I glanced at the swing. It still hadn't moved. Not even a squeak from the chains. Tied to what? Brad gave a tired shrug. We don't know. Could have been part of the hoodie. Could have been a tarp. Could have been anything. I knelt beside Ruckus and scratched behind his ears. He thinks there's more, I murmured. Brad hesitated. You think so? He won't stop watching it, not even when the reporters came. He seems like he knows something we don't. He always has. That afternoon, Wilkins returned with 2 canine units. Ruckus didn't react to them much, just gave a polite sniff and returned to his vigil. The other dogs sniffed the swing, the bushes, the path Ruckus had walked, They found nothing new. "Maybe your boy here already did the work," Wilkins said, kneeling beside Ruckus and offering him a biscuit. "Or maybe there's something he's waiting for." The crowd grew larger every day. Some folks brought candles, others brought small stuffed animals they left under the oak. And not just for Lily. There were notes attached to some, scrawled in crayon, naming other missing children from nearby counties. The park was becoming a quiet memorial. And then, on the fourth day, something shifted. Ruckus stood up. He hadn't done that before. He had always sat, waited, watched. But that Thursday morning, just past sunrise, he stood. Not tense, not aggressive, just focused. He took 5 slow steps toward the swing, then stopped. He looked back at me, then ahead again. "What is it?" I whispered. He walked again, nose low, leading us away from the swing, but only slightly. He moved along the fence line of the park, then turned sharply into the wooded patch just past the maintenance shed. I followed, heart pounding. Brad and Wilkins were close behind. He stopped at a patch of ivy and began pawing again. This time, what he uncovered wasn't a toy or clothing. It was a silver bracelet. Delicate, with small round charms that spelled out Lily. Brad crouched, bagged it, and stared at me. "There's no way this isn't connected," Wilkins agreed. "It's a message. Someone's been placing these, not all at once. Slowly, as if they're trying to say something but can't do it directly." "Why now?" I asked. Wilkins shook his head. "No idea, but your dog might be the only one getting through to whoever's doing it." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every moment Ruckus had paused, sniffed, stared. I wondered if I had missed something. I wondered if someone was watching us, using Ruckus as a conduit. The idea should have terrified me. Instead, it gave me purpose. I started leaving the house earlier, just before dawn. I brought a small notebook and began writing down every place Ruckus stopped, how long he stared, whether the swing moved. It never did. But still, I noted it. On Sunday, Ruckus did something new again. He walked up to the swing. He sniffed one of the ropes, then lay down directly underneath it, his nose pointed up toward the seat. Brad and Wilkins watched from the edge of the clearing. "What's he doing now?" Brad asked. "Waiting," I said. "For what?" "I think for someone to come back." And then I saw it. The swing moved. Just a little. A breeze, maybe. But there was no breeze anywhere else. Ruckus didn't flinch. He just wagged his tail. Once, like he was greeting someone. We didn't speak of it then. Too strange, too unreal. But the next day, someone left a letter. It was taped to the park bench, folded in half, addressed simply, "To the man with the dog." I opened it with shaking hands. I didn't mean to hurt her. I never touched her. I only watched. I saw everything. I wanted to stop it, but I couldn't. I was too scared. I've kept her things because I didn't want her to disappear completely. I didn't know what to do. But your dog, he reminds me of her. I think she liked dogs. No name, no return address, just guilt written in block letters. I turned it over. There was a line at the bottom. "There's one more thing, but I need to know it's safe. If he waits again tomorrow, I'll leave it." I showed the letter to Wilkins. He read it 3 times before speaking. "We're going to stake out the park. Plainclothes officers, unmarked cars. But you and Ruckus, you come like normal. Same time, same spot." I nodded. I didn't know what else to do. The next morning was clear, chilly, I bundled up and made my way to the park. Ruckus didn't seem tense. He was almost calm, like he knew we were getting closer. He sat at the swing again. Then, slowly, he walked to the northern edge of the park, where the tree line thickened. He sat by a hollow in a rotting stump and looked up at me. There, nestled between dead leaves, was a small music box. Wooden, with peeling paint. The kind you wind up. I picked it up gently and turned the key. It played Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. The melody cracked with age, but it played. Inside was a photo. Lily. Smiling. Ruckus leaned against me. Wilkins emerged from the trees. "We didn't see anyone leave it, but there are prints on the box." I held it close. The swing creaked behind us, and Ruckus wagged his tail again. This wasn't over. Not yet, but something had changed. Something had started. I hadn't realized how quiet a park could get until that morning. Not the kind of quiet that comes from stillness, but a deeper hush, like the ground itself was listening. Ruckus had fallen into a pattern now. Each day, he would visit the swing, sniff around it like a sentry checking his post, then guide me somewhere new. Each location a breadcrumb in a story that had refused to be told for 3 years. After the music box and the photo, the case had officially shifted. Wilkins told me they were no longer treating it as a disappearance. Now it was an open criminal investigation. The news was out in full force again, but the tone had changed. Before, they had spoken in whispers and speculation. Now there was hope. Cautious but real. The morning after the music box, Ruckus didn't sit by the swing. Instead, he paced, not frantic, just searching. His nose swept the ground like a scanner, and then he paused, his tail stiff. I followed him to the base of a weeping willow near the creek that ran behind the park. He circled it twice, then began digging at the base of a partially uprooted root. I knelt beside him. Buried under a thin layer of soil was a child's drawing. Torn, water-stained, but still legible. It was a crayon picture, blue sky, green grass, and a stick figure of a girl standing next to a big yellow dog. In shaky letters, the name Lily was written at the bottom. It was dated 2 days before her disappearance. Brad and Wilkins arrived quickly. Wilkins studied the drawing for a long time without speaking. "I want this analyzed," he finally said, handing it off. "Look for anything. Watermarks, fingerprints, even pollen. We need to know where this has been and how it ended up here now." I watched the creek flow past us, the current soft and slow. It didn't feel like we were chasing a ghost anymore. It felt like the past was inching its way back to the surface, one fragile piece at a time. That afternoon, Wilkins called me. "We have something," he said. "From the photo, the background of Lily's picture in the music box. There's a window reflection. We cleaned it up. It shows a man's silhouette. Can't ID him, but it's someone tall, wearing a flannel shirt." "Do you have suspects who fit that?" I asked. "There were a few back then. One of the maintenance crew had a history, but we couldn't prove anything. Another man lived near the park. Loner, odd, but nothing concrete. We'll revisit them all." I hung up and sat on my porch with Ruckus. He lay at my feet, belly up to the sunlight, eyes half closed. I wondered if he was tired from all this. But then he opened one eye and stared at me as if to say, "Not yet." The next morning, a toy train appeared near the swing. Not buried, just placed gently under the bench where I usually sat. I hadn't seen anyone put it there. No one had. It felt deliberate, personal. A message. Taped to the bottom was a note. "She liked this one best. I took it from her backpack. I'm sorry." The handwriting was the same as the first letter. Block letters. Careful. Wilkins had the note analyzed, but there were no prints. Whoever was doing this was cautious, but not cruel. Everything about the tone in the notes suggested guilt, not malice. That day, Ruckus didn't lead me to a new item. Instead, he walked the perimeter of the park 3 full times. On the 4th, he stopped behind the old baseball diamond, near a collapsed chain-link fence. He sniffed the grass, then lay down. I knelt beside him. There, tangled in the weeds, was a faded blue ribbon. Wilkins arrived 10 minutes later. When I showed it to him, his face hardened. This was tied in Lily's hair the day she vanished. That night, I couldn't sleep again. The image of that ribbon, the drawing, the music box, all of it swirled in my mind when I kept thinking about the man in the flannel shirt. Someone had been watching. Someone had kept these pieces, hidden them, only to start revealing them now. But why? Then it hit me. Whoever this person was, they were local. They hadn't mailed the notes or left things far away. They were coming to the park. They were close enough to see Ruckus and me every day. I told Wilkins. He agreed. Surveillance was increased. Officers in jogger gear patrolled in laps. A new camera was mounted near the oak. Still, the next clue came without warning. It was a key, left on the bench beside a dog treat. The treat was the kind Ruckus liked. Beef-flavored, bone-shaped, from a brand I knew well. The key was attached to a tag that read, "Storage 19, Hollow Creek Lockup." Wilkins went with me. We brought Ruckus, too. The storage unit was in a run-down facility on the edge of town. The manager had never seen who rented Unit 19. The payments were made in cash, on time, no contact info. The key slid into the lock smoothly. The door groaned as we lifted it. Inside were boxes, dozens of them. Some labeled toys, others clothes. One read videos. The air smelled musty, like old memories and forgotten secrets. Wilkins opened a box labeled toys. Inside were dolls, plastic dinosaurs, blocks, all worn, all familiar. "These could be from multiple kids," he muttered. Another box held clothing, children's shirts, shoes, even socks. Faded name tags were sewn into some. Lily M. We froze. Wilkins called in backup and forensics. They cordoned off the area within 20 minutes. But what struck me most was a photo pinned to the inside wall of the unit. It was of the park. Hollow Creek. Taken from a high vantage point, maybe a tree or building. In the corner, there she was. Lily. Swinging, laughing. Whoever took it had been watching her even before she vanished. Wilkins approached me. "There's more to this than one child. We're going to recheck every case within a 100-mile radius." Ruckus let out a soft bark. Not a warning, but as if he agreed. That night, I stayed up researching old news articles. Names of children who had disappeared, unsolved files, parks in nearby towns. I started making a map. Red pins for missing, green ones for found. Patterns began to form. The park wasn't the only location, but it was central. The next morning, Ruckus stopped at the swing as usual. Then he did something he hadn't done before. He barked. Once. Loud. I turned and saw a man across the field. Tall, wearing a flannel shirt. He turned and walked away quickly. I snapped a photo. Wilkins ran the image through their system. No matches. But now they had a face. A composite sketch went out. The media picked it up. Calls poured in. And Ruckus? He just sat there, eyes on the swing. tail gently sweeping the grass. Something in him said we weren't done yet, and I believed him. There was a feeling in the air now, like electricity just before a storm. It hummed beneath the surface of everything, from the swing that swayed when no one touched it, to the sharp way Ruckus's ears twitched at even the softest sound. We weren't alone anymore. Everyone could sense it. The truth was circling, getting closer, but no one knew where it would land. The man in the flannel had vanished. No hits on the photo, no tips that led anywhere solid. It was as if he'd dissolved back into the trees. Wilkins was frustrated. Brad was restless. The rest of the department rotated shifts at Hollow Creek, making their presence known without disrupting the park's eerie quiet. And every morning, Ruckus waited. It was on the 6th morning after we saw the man that something changed again. I found Ruckus sitting by the swing at sunrise like usual, but this time he wasn't alone. A small boy, maybe 8 or 9, stood a few feet behind him, wearing a bright orange hoodie and holding a worn backpack. He looked like he didn't belong there, like he hadn't planned to be found. I approached slowly. "Hey there," I said gently. "You okay?" The boy nodded, barely. "This is where he used to bring us," he said. I felt my heart drop. "Who?" He glanced at Ruckus, then back at me. "The man in the truck, with the flannel. He said we were helping him, that we had to keep secret so the bad people wouldn't find us." "Did he hurt you?" "No," he said. "But he made us hide, in boxes, sometimes for hours." "Are you alone now?" He nodded again. "I ran away last night. I knew you'd be here. With the dog." I called Wilkins. He was there within minutes, speaking softly to the boy, whose name was Eli. Ruckus stayed near him, his body relaxed, almost protective. Eli didn't flinch when the officers showed up. He just kept his eyes on the swing. "He said the girl liked to swing," Eli whispered. "But she cried a lot. He didn't like that." That was the moment I realized this wasn't about one missing child anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. Eli led the officers to a shed behind an abandoned house on the edge of town. Inside were sleeping bags, canned food, crates of toys, and makeshift beds. There were notebooks, too. Scribbled drawings, names, dates. Some matched names on Wilkins's missing persons list. One wall was covered in photos. Most were candid shots of kids at playgrounds, schoolyards, parks, all taken from a distance. There was one of Lily, the same photo from the storage unit, only this one had a second figure standing behind her. A blurry, shadowy shape. Eli confirmed what they feared. The man had taken more than one child. Some had been returned quietly to foster care or dropped off at shelters under fake names. Others? They didn't know. The media frenzy exploded again. Ruckus's photo ran alongside Eli's in a headline that read, "Boy escapes captor. Dog leads rescuers to clues." But Ruckus didn't care about cameras. He stayed close to the swing every day, waiting. I asked Wilkins if they thought the man would return. "He might," Wilkins said. "Or he might disappear for good. But people like that, they leave trails. And now we have a trail dog smarter than half our department." It wasn't a compliment. It was the truth. That weekend, Ruckus led me to a trail behind the park I didn't know existed. Overgrown, hidden by brush, it sloped downward toward an old irrigation ditch. There, under a rusted sheet of metal, was another box. Inside, baby shoes, a locket, and a note. I didn't want this. I tried to stop. I told them it was wrong, but they said it was too late. Please, find the others." The word others chilled me. Wilkins launched a broader search that extended to counties we hadn't considered. The task force doubled. And still, Ruckus came back to the swing. It had become more than a crime scene. It was a gathering place, not just for mourners, but for truth, for justice, for whatever came next. One morning, a woman approached me as Ruckus sniffed the ground nearby. She was older, maybe in her late 60s, with a canvas bag full of fresh flowers. She placed a bouquet under the swing and said nothing for a long time. Finally, she whispered, "He used to be my neighbor, always quiet. But his truck, that truck was always near schools." I turned to her. "Did you report it?" She shook her head. I didn't know what it meant. And when Lily went missing, I thought I saw something, but no one believed me. "Do you remember his name?" She nodded. "Earl Jennings. Used to live on Hollow Pines Road. Moved out right after the search ended." I passed the name to Wilkins. It matched an old maintenance worker who had left the state suddenly 3 years ago. They found Jennings 3 days later, living in a trailer park across the border under an alias. He denied everything, at first. But when they showed him the photo of Ruckus at the swing, something in him cracked. He asked for a lawyer, but he also asked one other thing. "Is the dog okay?" Wilkins told me that. He didn't know what it meant. I did. That dog was the reason this hadn't stayed buried. And the next morning, Ruckus did something different. He didn't go to the swing. He walked to the north edge of the park, near the willow. There, tucked between 2 stones, was a scrap of paper. On it, coordinates. I entered them into my phone. The location was 40 miles east, near a cabin by Lake Crenshaw. Wilkins didn't wait. They mobilized instantly, and Ruckus and I went with them. The cabin was empty, but in the root cellar they found trunks. Dozens of them, locked. Inside were clothes, journals, and items from more children. Some confirmed missing, others unknown. They called in specialists, DNA analysts, therapists. It was overwhelming. That night, I sat outside the cabin with Ruckus beside me. He stared into the woods like he was still on alert, like this was just another piece. And I believed him. The swing hadn't moved that morning, but maybe it didn't have to. Maybe it had done its part. Now it was Ruckus's turn to finish the rest. Ruckus had never liked long car rides. He usually whined by the second mile, fidgeted with his paws, and pressed his snout against the window like a child who wanted to go home. But on the way back from Lake Crenshaw, he sat completely still. Staring. Thinking. If dogs could think in the way we understood it, then Ruckus was deep in something. Something I couldn't touch. Back in Hollow Creek, the park looked untouched by all the chaos. No ribbons, no crowds. The swing hung motionless under the tree, as if it had been waiting. Ruckus didn't head toward it, not at first. Instead, he walked a wide circle around the oak, nose to the ground. Then he made a slow arc toward the northeast edge, where the playground met the woods. He stopped at a small patch of ground that had been disturbed. I looked closer. There were no obvious clues, just soil that seemed too soft for the season. He pawed at it once. Then again. I pulled my gloves on and started digging beside him. A few inches down, I struck something hard. Metal. It was a box, smaller than the ones at the lake. A lunch tin, red and rusted, with peeling stickers of cartoon animals. I opened it carefully. Inside was a bundle of notes, folded neatly. Drawings, too. Crayon scrawls, stick figures, stars. But at the very bottom was a photo. A blurry picture of Lily holding a balloon. Behind her, just at the edge of the frame, was that flannel again. Wilkins met me within the hour. He studied the contents without speaking. "I think we're looking at more than Jennings," he said eventually. "Someone else was involved. Maybe multiple people." "But why the notes?" I asked. "Why bury them here?" Wilkins looked out at the park. "Because someone wanted us to find them, and they trusted your dog more than they trusted any of us." That idea rattled around in my brain for days. Ruckus wasn't just following scent. He was following a pattern. Someone's routine. And if Jennings hadn't acted alone, maybe Ruckus had sensed that too. They assigned a special analyst to go through all the notes and drawings. One stood out. It showed a man in a hat handing something to a child. In the corner, written in shaky letters, "At the fence." The fence. Ruckus had paused there a dozen times, but I hadn't thought much of it. We walked to it together that afternoon. He sniffed along the chain link and stopped at a section where the wire had been cut and rewoven. From a distance, it looked undisturbed. Up close, it told a different story. Behind it was a narrow service road leading to a long abandoned maintenance building. I remembered it vaguely from years ago, a place the city said they'd demolish but never did. Ruckus led the way. The building was small, low, and partially hidden by brush. A rusted lock hung loose from the doorframe. Wilkins had a warrant by sunset. Inside, the building smelled of mildew and dust. Old buckets, broken rakes, decaying bags of fertilizer. But in the back room, behind a false panel, they found more boxes. Some newer, some older. One had a tape recorder. Another had what looked like a child's scrapbook. There were names. Dozens. Wilkins's jaw tightened. This was a hub. He wasn't working alone. He had a system. Maybe a partner. They sent samples for analysis. They set up 24-hour surveillance. But there was something else. Something Ruckus was still sensing. The next morning, he returned to the park like always. This time, he sat by the swing, head tilted slightly. I watched him. Then I followed his eyes. There was something about the tree, not the swing, but the tree itself. I walked around it slowly. Near the base, where the roots curled above the soil, I saw a piece of cloth wedged into a knot. Faded blue. I pulled it free. It was a child's sock. Tiny. Stiff with dirt. Ruckus didn't move. He just sat, watching. Back at home, I kept thinking about the drawings, about the people who had watched and said nothing. The neighbors, the bystanders. It was too big for one person. Jennings may have been the face, but others knew. And maybe one of them had finally decided to speak, through clues, through silence, through trust in a dog who saw through everything. That night, someone knocked on my door. I opened it to find a man in his 50s, clean-shaven, baseball cap, eyes that didn't meet mine. "You're the one with the dog," he said. "Yes." He pulled something from his jacket pocket, a cassette. "He gave this to me years ago, told me to hold it. I didn't ask questions, but I've been watching the news, the boy, the park. I think you should have it." He left before I could say anything else. I brought it to Wilkins the next morning. They transferred the audio to digital. What we heard made everyone go still. Jennings's voice. Calm, matter-of-fact, describing routines, parks, patterns. And then another voice, one they didn't recognize, giving names, instructions. It was clear Jennings wasn't the leader. The real man in charge was still out there. Wilkins met me outside the station that afternoon. "If that voice is real, this isn't over. Not even close." "I know," I said. And Ruckus knows it too. He nodded. We want to keep working with you both, if you're willing. We never stopped. Ruckus nudged my hand gently, not for food, not for a treat, but because there was more to find. And he was ready to keep going. When I walked through Hollow Creek Park that next morning, something was different. The air felt heavier, not with threat, but with expectation. The kind of weight that presses down when you're standing at the edge of something big, and you don't even know what it is yet. Ruckus wasn't his usual slow-walking self either. He moved with purpose, his gait steady, eyes scanning like a tracker on a trail he hadn't finished yet. He didn't pause at the swing this time. He didn't even glance at it. Instead, he led me toward the edge of the parking lot, where a row of pine trees had grown wild over the years, their branches knotted together like fingers locking secrets underneath. He sniffed low to the ground, weaving between roots and thorny vines until he came to a stop at the base of the largest tree. There, nestled in the soil, was a stone. It looked ordinary, just a flat, gray piece of slate, but Ruckus pawed at it and then looked back at me with a sharp, meaningful stare. I knelt beside him and brushed away the leaves. Under the stone was another note, sealed in a small plastic bag to protect it from the weather. I opened it slowly. Not everyone helped him. Some of us watched because we were scared. He said if we talked, he'd make us disappear too. But she used to sing under this tree. Her voice still echoes here. I hear her in my dreams. There was no name, no clue to who had written it. But it was a confession. Maybe not of guilt, but of silence. And silence, in this case, had been just as dangerous. I took the note to Wilkins. He read it twice, his mouth set in a firm line. There's someone local who keeps leaving these, he said. They're not taunting us. They're leading us, just like Ruckus is. And we need to keep listening. We scanned the base of the tree, the soil nearby, even the lowest branches. No new items, no signs of the person. But Ruckus stayed rooted there for nearly half an hour, like he was waiting for something more. By that point, the town had started to change. The news reports no longer called Hollow Creek Park cursed. They called it holy ground. People left letters of their own, thank you notes to Ruckus, drawings of Lily, candles arranged in circles at the base of the oak tree. The community, which had once tried to forget, was beginning to remember the right way. One afternoon, as I walked Ruckus past the old bench near the baseball field, a teenager approached. He had a nervous look, shifting on his heels, biting at a hangnail. You're the guy with the dog, right? I nodded. He glanced down. I think I saw something. Back then. But I didn't tell anyone. I was 12. I thought it was just some weird guy watching birds or something, but he had a camera. And he was always by that maintenance shed, the one near the creek. My heart quickened. I called Wilkins. Within the hour, a small team was combing the area behind the creek. That maintenance shed had been cleared once before, years ago, but this time they checked beneath the floorboards. They found a crawl space. Inside, a tattered duffel bag filled with labeled Polaroids. Some of children playing, some of children crying, all from different towns. And then, taped to the inside of the panel above the bag, they found a name. Dennis Greer. He wasn't in any of the systems under that name, but facial recognition software pulled an alias from another state. A man with a long history of changing names, moving jobs, blending in. The photo from the park, the man in flannel, matched. He hadn't been working alone, but now at least they had a name to go with the second voice on that tape. Ruckus didn't react when I told him. He just returned to the swing the next morning and sat down, like we still had work to do. And we did. A woman from 2 towns over came forward after the press release, said her daughter had vanished at a campground 5 years ago. Same pattern. She said she'd seen a man with a dog at the edge of the woods that night. Only the dog wasn't a golden retriever. It was a black lab. Scar on its shoulder. The man called it by name. Hunter. Wilkins investigated. Turns out Jennings once had a black lab. Records showed he'd put the dog down right before he left the state. No vet name. No official record of it being euthanized. Just a note in a local clinic's system saying, "Client changed mind." So where was the dog now? Ruckus sniffed the edge of the playground for a long time the next day. Then he veered left, through a gap in the hedge near the old school bus turnaround. There, under the overpass where kids once snuck off to smoke, was a ragged collar. Still attached to a torn lead. It had a tag. Hunter. Wilkins took it into evidence. They checked surrounding properties. One abandoned trailer had paw prints in the dust, too small to be a wolf or coyote, but too distinct to be anything else. Ruckus stood at the threshold of the trailer's porch and sniffed. Then he turned and walked away. Not from fear, not from boredom. Like he knew no one was there anymore. Not anyone worth chasing. That night, a woman named Marlene left a voicemail at the tip line. She said she used to work at a rest stop diner about an hour from town. Said a man came in often. Always alone. Always sat with a notebook. Once he talked about relocating orphans. She thought he was just eccentric. But after seeing Ruckus on the news, something in her remembered a photo. She still had it. It was taped to the wall behind her counter, snapped by a tourist. A group shot of the diner staff. In the background, a man in a flannel, half smiling. And sitting at his feet, a black lab with a faint scar on its shoulder. The pieces were falling into place. The task force expanded. They searched the nearby counties. Each time a new place was searched, Ruckus went too. Sometimes he'd sit, sometimes he'd move on. But when he lay down, everyone knew to start digging. He lay down near a barn 2 counties over. Hidden beneath the hayloft, they found another box. Inside, bracelets, a baby blanket, an old pacifier. It was never over. Not for Ruckus. And I understood now. He wasn't chasing one man. He was chasing the story no one wanted to write. And every morning, at Hollow Creek Park, he still paused by the swing, because that's where the story began. And somewhere, he knew, the rest of it still needed to be told. The wind picked up early that morning, tugging at the branches of the oak like it wanted to shake loose the secrets that had clung there too long. Ruckus didn't even glance at the swaying swing. He headed straight for the far end of the park, past the path, past the sign where kids used to line up for summer camp activities, toward the pond where no one swam anymore. I followed in silence, boots crunching over gravel, the leash slack between us. Ruckus sniffed the ground near a worn wooden bench overlooking the water. It was old, half-rotted, but still standing. He sat at its side and looked up at me, unmoving. I checked the ground. Beneath the bench was a plastic container, the kind used to store sandwiches. I opened it carefully. Inside was a laminated map of Hollow Creek, but not the way it looked now. It was older. There were markings in red, circles around specific areas: the swing, the shed, the fence line, the service road. But there were also circles around places we hadn't searched yet. I called Wilkins. He met me in less than 15 minutes, accompanied by Brad and a new detective from another district. They laid the map out across the hood of the cruiser, tracing the lines with their fingers. "Some of these spots don't make sense," Wilkins said. "Not yet," I told him, "but Ruckus brought us here for a reason." We decided to check the closest circle first. It was a patch of woods near the walking trail, overgrown and tangled with brambles. We moved in slowly, pushing branches aside, Ruckus guiding us by scent and silence. He stopped near an old tree stump, pawed once, and stepped back. We dug. A tin box, rusted nearly shut, surfaced after 5 minutes. Inside were buttons, children's buttons, sewn into pieces of cloth, some monogrammed, others plain. All of them worn from handling. Brad swallowed hard. This is a collection. I didn't need to ask what kind. Some people keep stamps. Some people keep worse. We marked the spot and moved to the next circle. This one led us to a culvert, half collapsed, running under an unused portion of the road. Ruckus didn't hesitate. He walked to the mouth of the tunnel and let out a low, sharp bark. Inside, we found signs of habitation. Broken lanterns, old food wrappers, a child's shoe, more drawings on scraps of cardboard, a journal. Wilkins read it aloud. He said I could come out only when I smiled. If I cried, I had to stay longer. I tried to smile. I really did. We didn't speak for a long time. Forensics took over. But Ruckus wasn't done. He tugged gently at the leash, nudging us further along the trail that paralleled the culvert. He led us to an old storm drain. Inside was a piece of chalk, still intact, still dusty. On the concrete wall, someone had drawn a sun. Not all clues are obvious. Some are quiet. Some just wait for the right eyes. That afternoon, Wilkins called a meeting with the task force. They laid the map on the wall, added new pins to the board, matched patterns. All the red circles from the container aligned with missing cases. Children taken from parks, day camps, hiking trails. Dennis Greer had been operating under aliases for years, but he hadn't worked alone. Someone else was drawing the maps, logging the locations. Whoever made that map wanted to help, or wanted to confess. And Ruckus? He was the only one they trusted. I brought him back to the park that evening. The sunset cast long shadows over the grass. He didn't head to the oak tree. He walked along the tree line, then circled back, pausing at the park's community board. Someone had pinned something new. A flyer. Not about the investigation. Just a simple page that read, "You remember me. You saw me at the swing. You knew what I was, and you stayed quiet. Say something now." There was no name, but it wasn't addressed to the police. It was a challenge to the others, to the people who saw and turned away. Wilkins ordered a canvass of the neighborhood, asked the media to replay the photo of the man in the flannel, asked citizens to check old photos from town events, carnivals, Halloween fairs, anything where children and staff were photographed. And then someone came forward. A retired school janitor said he recognized Greer from years back. He worked part-time at the district warehouse one summer. No one remembered hiring him. He said he cleaned storage rooms, but there were no records, no name badge, just came and went. They searched the old warehouse. It had since become a storage space for unused school furniture. In a locked closet near the back, they found more. Filing boxes filled with photographs, lists, names, even sketches. "It's like someone was documenting children like they were inventory," the detective said. And still, no one had seen who'd left the flyer on the board. That night, Ruckus paced the yard. He'd never done that before. Always still, always alert, but never pacing. He stopped at the gate and looked back at me. He wanted to go out, so I followed him, even though it was after midnight. He led me, not to the park, but to a small gravel road behind the old hardware store. There, beneath the broken neon sign, was a man in a hooded coat. He stood still, not running, not hiding, just waiting. Ruckus sat 20 feet away and stared. I approached slowly. "You know who I am," the man said. "You've been looking." "Who are you?" I asked. Someone who didn't stop him, but someone who tried to leave signs. He pulled a small notebook from his pocket and set it on the ground. "They're all in there. Every location, every name I could remember. I didn't know how else to get anyone to listen, until your dog started showing up." "Why now?" "Because I saw his face on the news, and I knew the others might come looking for me." He turned himself in. Wilkins confirmed the man was a former associate, helped Greer with transportation, was told the children were being rescued from abuse. He believed it, at first. Then he didn't. But by then, he said, it was too late. He'd used Ruckus to speak. He'd watched where the dog stopped, left notes he knew the police wouldn't notice, but the dog would. "I didn't want them to forget," he said. "The ones who didn't come back." Wilkins arrested him quietly. And the next day, Ruckus returned to the swing. He sat for an hour. Then he stood and walked to the bench by the pond. He looked back once. Not at me. At the swing. Like something had shifted. Like a page had turned. But not the end of the book. Just the start of the next chapter. We never stopped walking the park, even after the man in the hooded coat turned himself in. Even after the press started calling Ruckus a hero, a miracle dog, even a living legend. He didn't care about any of that. He still walked the loop each morning as if something unfinished remained tucked between the shadows of tree roots and the old swing's slow creak. It was a Monday when the cold finally came in for real. The trees had started to shed, and the grass gave that crisp, brown crunch beneath our boots. The playground was quiet. No crowds anymore. The story had cooled. The news cycle moved on. But Ruckus hadn't. He moved slower than before, a little more deliberate. He was getting older. I saw it in the silver coming through around his eyes. But when he paused at the northern edge of the park, I knew something was different. He didn't look like he was pausing to rest. He looked like he was waiting for something to arrive. I crouched beside him. The grass here had overgrown slightly, left untended by the city's maintenance crews. I brushed it back and saw the corner of what looked like laminated paper. Pulling it free, I saw it was another map. Hand-drawn. This one more detailed than the last. It didn't just show locations, it showed timelines, dates, years, initials. Ruckus let out a soft whine. I studied the map and recognized some of the initials. LM for Lily Matthews, EW for Eli Walker, the boy who'd found me months ago. But there were more I didn't recognize. Some dated all the way back to the late 90s. I brought the map to Wilkins. "This changes our scope," he said after studying it for 20 minutes. "This wasn't just the past decade. We're looking at something 25, maybe 30 years in the making." His team started rechecking missing persons reports from rural towns outside the county, places where no one thought to connect the dots. The notes were always the same. Vanished on walks, disappeared from backyards, last seen near wooded areas. Ruckus kept walking. He took us to an abandoned property south of town, once a hunting lodge, now swallowed by vines. He led us behind the shed, through a crack in the stone foundation, and pawed at the soil there. It took hours, but they unearthed a sealed wooden crate. Inside were blankets, toys, and 2 small pairs of shoes wrapped in plastic. One pair was pink, the other blue. 2 sets of initials were carved inside the lid, MD and SD. The database matched them to twins who went missing in 2002. The local papers had covered it briefly back then. 2 siblings gone after playing in their backyard. No leads, no suspects. But now, because of a dog and a buried crate, the family might finally get answers. Ruckus didn't wag his tail. He just turned and led us back to town. The weeks passed like that, one lead melting into another. Ruckus would signal, we would follow. Boxes would be unearthed, names matched. Some parents came forward. Others had passed on, never knowing. One afternoon, Ruckus sat by a tree near the school. It wasn't his usual route. I almost didn't notice him veer until he barked once, sharply. Beneath the tree was a backpack, moldy and torn, but still intact. Inside was a music player. Batteries long dead. But the screen lit up when charged. One file, one video. A young girl speaking directly to the camera. He said I'd get to go home soon, that I was just waiting my turn. But he lies. So I'm saying my name. My real name. Maybe someone will find this. Maybe someone will find me. She gave her name, her birthday, her school. She had been declared missing 16 years ago. Her photo had aged out of the active files. Now she had a name again. A voice. And all because Ruckus found her bag. The FBI got involved more formally then. They launched a task force focused specifically on the Cold Pines pattern, as they were calling it. A string of disappearances linked not by method, but by geography and timing. A cluster in early spring, another every October. Every pattern centered around wooded areas and rural roads. And always within 30 miles of Hollow Creek. Ruckus became their informal scout. Not every lead led to something, but every site he chose told a story. He sat once in the middle of an empty orchard, surrounded by dried apple trees. The wind was strong that day. Too strong. But he didn't flinch. And when the wind passed, we found it. A lockbox buried at the base of a tree, containing letters. Letters written by a child, addressed to a sibling. "I think I'm going to be okay," one read. "There's another kid here. We talk through the vent. He says he's been here longer." They were never mailed, but they'd survived. And now they were known. That night, Wilkins stood beside me outside the park. "I've worked cases for 30 years, he said. "I've seen justice. I've seen tragedy. But I've never seen anything like this dog. I don't know what he's following, but it's not just scent." "No," I said. "It's something deeper." And I believed that. Because the next morning, Ruckus walked a new route, one he had never chosen before. Down an alley, through a closed-off gate, across a rickety bridge to the far edge of the riverbank. And there, under a pile of discarded lumber, was another tin. A single note inside. "You're getting close. I can feel it. He's scared now, just like we were." And scribbled in the corner, "Keep going. He knows the path." No signature. No initials. But whoever left it, they knew Ruckus was coming. And they were rooting for him. So we kept going. Because Ruckus wasn't stopping. Not yet. The riverbank where Ruckus found the last note had once been a dumping ground for old construction debris, piles of sheet metal, shattered bricks, rusted nails by the handful. The city had meant to clear it years ago, but never followed through. Now, it felt like the silence of that neglect had stored something deeper. Ruckus returned to the same site 3 days in a row, sniffing the air, pacing in wide arcs. I didn't need to ask if there was more. I could see it in the tight set of his shoulders, in the way his body braced whenever the wind changed. On the fourth morning, he led me further upstream, past where the fencing cut off, to a break in the trees that overlooked an old concrete tunnel. The entrance was dark, barely visible from the trail. The last time I'd even seen it, I was still a teenager. Ruckus stepped inside without hesitation. I clicked on my flashlight and followed. The tunnel echoed with every step. Bits of water dripped from cracks above. Graffiti lined the walls, most of it faded nonsense from years gone by. But about 50 feet in, Ruckus stopped. His nose brushed the wall. A name was scrawled there, not spray-painted. Scratched. Lily. Underneath it, a date, just 2 days after she disappeared. Wilkins called in a forensic team the moment I showed him the photo. They didn't find fingerprints, but there were traces of wax on the ground, candle stubs long since extinguished. Someone had brought her there, maybe briefly, maybe just to hide, or maybe to leave a message. We kept going. Ruckus took us beyond the tunnel, through the woods that bordered the edge of a forgotten industrial road. On the third turn, he stopped cold and began to bark. Loud. Deep. We found a shack. It wasn't even marked on the city map. Just a slant-roofed plywood structure with a warped door barely hanging by its hinges. Ruckus wouldn't go inside. He stayed just outside the doorway, body stiff. Inside, Wilkins and Brad discovered what could only be called a staging ground. Blankets, ropes, flashlights, water bottles, a stack of coloring books, a box of unused burner phones, all powered down, and a list. Names, initials, descriptions. Some had check marks beside them. Some were crossed out. Some were circled. They matched several children already identified through Ruckus's finds, but others didn't match any known records. One name was circled 3 times. J.C. We had no clue who that was, until later that night. A call came in from a woman who lived in a cabin just outside of Fairgrove. She said her niece, Julia Carter, had gone missing at a rest stop over a decade ago. She'd been with her stepfather. He said she wandered off. The case went nowhere. The man vanished a year later. Julia was never found. J.C. Wilkins looked like he'd been punched in the gut. We sent a team to the last known address of the stepfather. Empty. Condemned. But Ruckus picked up the trail again. He led us behind the house, through a swampy patch of land lined with reeds, to a patch of disturbed soil under an old fishing shack. No bodies. No bones. But a tin lunchbox. Inside, a bracelet with Julia spelled out in worn beads, a small lock of hair tied with a ribbon, and a notebook. The first page was dated the day she went missing. I know I have to be quiet, but I'm scared. If I ever get out, I want to remember my name. I want to remember the sun. The last entry was weeks later. He said I had to leave, that someone new was coming. He said I was lucky to go first. She had written in careful block letters, like a child trying to prove she was older than she felt. We still didn't know where she ended up, but we knew she had lived and left a trace. The FBI confirmed the notebook's ink and paper matched the era. There was no sign of forgery. Ruckus kept going. That weekend, he led us to the edge of a burned-out barn. The roof had collapsed years ago. Inside, beneath charred beams and soot-coated walls, he found a wooden crate. Inside were cassette tapes. They were labeled by numbers. No names, no dates, just 1, 2, 3, and on. The audio was horrifying. Children's voices, crying, some talking to each other, some singing. And always, in the background, the sound of a man's breathing. FBI analysts were able to enhance portions. One child gave the first name Eric. Another asked, "Is the dog coming back?" That line hit hard, because someone, somewhere, had promised a dog would help. Maybe it was false hope. Or maybe it had always been Ruckus they were waiting for. The agents built a database from every scrap we had, the initials, the maps, the recordings, and a profile emerged. This wasn't just a man operating alone. This was a network, possibly multiple men who passed children between locations, used aliases, and coordinated through analog systems to avoid detection. But someone had turned against them. Someone who left maps, left notes, who used Ruckus as a messenger. One morning, a new envelope appeared at the swing. Plain white. No writing. Inside, a photograph. A boy, maybe 10, holding a chalkboard with his name, Jeremy. On the back of the photo, "He's still alive. He's with the last one." There was no address, no date. But the trees in the photo had distinctive markings, carved initials in a nearby trunk. Ruckus studied the photo, literally sniffed it. Then he took off. We followed him north toward an area we hadn't searched yet, old summer cabins once rented out by church groups. The land had been vacant for years after a fire wiped out half the property. Ruckus ran ahead. Fast. Faster than I'd seen him move in months. He stopped at a collapsed cabin, pawed at the side door. Wilkins's team breached it carefully. In the crawl space, they found supplies. Blankets, water, canned food, and a small cot. But no Jeremy. There was, however, a drawing. A dog. A golden one. And the words, "He'll find me." We were getting close. Closer than ever. And Ruckus knew it. We didn't sleep much that night. Not me, not Wilkins, not any member of the task force. Not after the crawl space. Not after that drawing. The hope was too sharp now, cutting through exhaustion, making everything feel urgent, immediate. We were near the end, wherever that was, and Ruckus knew it. He paced all night, from the front door to the edge of the porch, nose in the wind, like he could feel the direction shifting. I sat beside him for hours, with a blanket over my shoulders, listening to the soft tap of his nails on the wood, the occasional grunt, when he paused, alert. Just after dawn, he stood still as a statue, facing east. Then he ran. I scrambled after him, grabbing my coat and boots, barely locking the door. He took off down the road, fast but purposeful, like every muscle in his body had waited for this very morning. We cut through a field, past a chain of rusted mailboxes, and into a path I didn't recognize. An old hunting trail leading into dense woods. Wilkins was already calling me. I gave him coordinates as I jogged to keep up. Within 10 minutes, backup was en route. Within 20, a helicopter was overhead. Ruckus didn't stop. The trail ended at a rundown cabin nestled in a small clearing, so overgrown you wouldn't have seen it unless you were looking for it. The windows were covered with sheets. No visible car. Just a generator buzzing faintly from the rear. Ruckus sat down 15 feet from the front steps and waited. Wilkins arrived with Brad and 2 FBI agents. They surrounded the structure. Silent as ghosts. Inside, they found him. Dennis Greer, the man in the flannel. Alive. Unarmed. Alone. Sitting at a table with a child beside him. a boy with sandy hair and wide eyes, holding a stuffed dog. Jeremy. Greer didn't resist, didn't speak. Just stared at Ruckus through the cracked window as the agents led him outside. Jeremy was taken to safety. His name was confirmed, his identity verified. He was 10 years old. He remembered everything. He said someone was coming for me, he told the officer gently. He said the dog would find me if I waited. That line followed me back to Hollow Creek, back to the swing. Ruckus sat beneath it again that evening, like he always had. He didn't bark, didn't chase the wind. He just closed his eyes and rested. Over the following weeks, everything unfolded like slow motion. The tapes led to indictments. The maps led to recovery sites. Jeremy's testimony confirmed the final link in the network. 3 more arrests followed. Locations were secured. Names of the lost were confirmed. Families who'd been in the dark for decades suddenly had truth. Not comfort, but clarity. The town changed. Hollow Creek Park reopened with a new plaque beside the swing. For the voices that were never silent, only unheard. And for the dog who listened. People brought their kids again, left sunflowers and painted rocks. Even other dogs. Some days, a dozen would show up, sitting beside Ruckus like they understood. Wilkins retired not long after. He said he wanted his grandkids to grow up in a town where dogs were allowed to be heroes. I still walked Ruckus every morning. He was slower now, his face grayer, his limbs a little stiff. But he always stood by that swing, always looked back once, just to check. Then one day, he didn't get up. He wasn't in pain. He wasn't sick. He was just tired. He passed quietly, curled at the base of the oak. The town held a vigil. Hundreds showed up. Candles, letters, photos. News stations covered it. Children from across the county drew pictures. Some of them even said the same thing. He found me. I buried him under the oak, just beneath the swing. And every so often, when the breeze is just right, that swing moves. Not from the wind, from something lighter, quieter, watching, waiting. And I always smile, because I know. He's still listening. That summer, a boy named Eli, yes, the same Eli who found me long ago, came to visit the park with his adoptive family. He stood by the swing, quiet for a long while, and then sat cross-legged beneath the oak where Ruckus was buried. His mom tried to call him back to the car, but he held up one hand, just a minute. He pulled a folded drawing from his pocket. It showed him and Ruckus side by side, drawn in colored pencil. Above them, in a child's handwriting, were the words, "My real hero." I sat on the bench and watched. The sun filtered through the branches, and the air buzzed with cicadas. Eli didn't say anything to me. He didn't have to. I nodded, and he nodded back. He stayed another 10 minutes, just sitting. Then he left the drawing at the base of the tree and walked away. That night I laminated it and hung it in my front window. One morning, a week later, I saw something strange. A dog collar had been placed neatly on the swing. Not Ruckus's, but an old one, worn leather, a silver tag that read, "Found." I asked around. No one had seen who left it. Wilkins hadn't. Brad hadn't. No cameras caught it. It just appeared. I took it home, cleaned it gently, and added it to a growing collection of thank yous, drawings, and small mementos locals had dropped off for me to keep. There was a piece to all of it. The kind that comes not from forgetting, but from being remembered well. The town's library now has a dedicated room in its children's section called Ruckus Corner. It's filled with books about brave animals and kind strangers and kids who never gave up. There's a bronze sculpture of Ruckus lying beside a storybook, and children sit next to it on beanbags while volunteers read to them. Every so often, I visit, sit in the back, listen to a story. And sometimes, when no one is watching, I swear I hear the faint sound of paws tapping on the tile floor. Hope doesn't always bark, but sometimes it does.